Hi everyone, welcome to Retail Emit TV. Today I have with me Hayan Merchant, the founder and CEO of Navitus Perfumes, a very well-known name in the luxury perfume category. I don't want to give away much because I want to ask him what is the secret of selling luxury perfumes. So, Hayan, welcome to Retail Emit TV.
Thank you.
So let's start from the beginning. You have come to Middle East from a very experienced background. So how did it all start?
Yes, thank you for having me. I think the interest, for us was as a personal passion for me in fine fragrance when I started the brand, and we launched in New York in 2019, before COVID-19, and we became the first brand in the world at the time to launch luxury fine fragrance entirely online, which as a concept was unheard of at the time, that somebody would pay 1,000 dirhams for a perfume before they can even smell it. So we had to really, scratch our head, work backwards and say, how do you really build trust in a brand? How do you build trust in the product? And what sort of collaborative approach you need to take as a new brand, which no one knows of, to really build on those principles. So what we did was we tied up together with very accomplished master perfumers internationally, who normally never associate and create fragrances for new brands. And after having their trust, we launched online as a fine fragrance brand. Historically, brands would normally have an in-store presence and then go online. So it's always about migration and what percentage they convert. But for us, it was really launching the brand. It was a leap of faith. And I would say that it turned out in retrospect to be a very successful start because we were sold out in a few hours. And that really solidified that our approach of building trust and credibility for the brand and then the products really paid off in the US. I think what's really important for us and has been all along is really not compromising on our basic fundamental principles. As a brand which is digital forward, now we are in many stores internationally, but as a digital forward brand, as a brand that launched digital first, the principles that made us successful back in 2019 are the same ones that we follow today, which is how do you build trust and credibility with new customers? That goes to show in the US when we won the Brand of the Year award last December, which really was a very humbling moment for us because we were competing with a lot of conventional luxury, prestige and heritage brands which have been around for many years. So I think it went to show us, one, that luxury fine fragrance with a digital first approach is A, possible, B, scalable, because we have people from all over North America voting in, so the size really reflects the size we've come to be today. And I think going into international markets, and you touching about the Middle East, this is a very close place to my heart because I'm born in Dubai. And for me, it's really been about taking the learnings from the North American market and the international market and seeing how do we need to regionalize it here. It's not, I don't think the same approach works. We are having to, for the last 6 months, work very hard in determining the right way to do it, simply because there's a lot of brands, there's a lot of business activity, there's a lot of economic and digital activity going on. So how do you stand out from the crowd without just resorting to conventional ways and conventional marketing? So I think for us in the Middle East, the challenges are new to an extent because it is taking the learnings and then adapting them for the region. Because whilst in the US it was difficult for people to buy fine fragrance before smelling it, I think it's even more difficult for people in this region. So as a product category that we are in, I think we really have to solidify further those elements of trust and credibility. And we are seeing already what's working better, and we are now emphasizing more time and effort on that, which is, I think in the Middle East, it's really about conventionally people would see a product in a shopping mall and then go and know they can buy it online with trust because now they've eliminated the product assessment part of things. Whereas with a fine fragrance, which you can't smell, just by saying the fragrance has rose or oud, it doesn't mean much to a common consumer. Till they don't smell it, till they don't associate with that fragrance, it's a very personalized experience, and we are trying to replicate that on the digital front.
Correct. But you yourself mentioned the challenges in Middle East is different, but how is the market unique as compared to the other global,
I would say that at least from the fine fragrance perspective, I think the customer in this region is far more demanding. Whereas I find the US consumer is also demanding, but in a different way. They are looking out for certain features, let's say, within a fine fragrance in terms of the natural compounds used, in terms of the green chemistry principle used for sustainability, or in terms of clean perfumery and not using any toxic ingredients which may have potential harmful effects on your skin. So I think their criteria of assessing a brand are very different. And what's important here is all of that I've just mentioned, plus a lot of other facets. So I think for this region, it is really dealing with a more demanding customer who's expecting a much more of a personalized approach. Secondly, and very importantly, I think this region is very international. So is the US, perhaps. New York is a very international city, but I think in Dubai especially, and in the UAE, we are noticing it's very difficult to assess a trend. In fragrances, people are predicting trends for the next 24 months in the global fine fragrance research companies. But in the Middle East, it is very difficult to do that because of the diversity of backgrounds. So you have, let's say, somebody coming from the Asian subcontinent. Their preferences are very different from the local Emirati or Gulf Khaliji population to the international, European, American consumer. So I think it is really, for us, it has really been not getting, I would say, confused by that, but really going back and saying, what is the brand about?
Sure.
What is the brand? What are the principles the brand stands on? And with perfumery, you are not creating fragrances to please an audience. You're creating perfumery as an artistic expression of what you wanted to create in a scent profile. And I think we continue to be true to that we continue to create fragrances which we feel are artistic in value, which have a high variability, so you will enjoy your fragrance experience and you can create memories with it, but not looking at only what the market needs and then trying to deliver that, because with fragrance, you may lose a bit of artistry when you try to do that.
Correct. But obviously, we know that Navitas gives people a customized approach. So for that, did you have to rework your pricing when you stepped into the Middle Eastern market, or pricing was never a concern as compared to your competitors?
I think pricing has never been a concern for us because of the high quality of natural ingredients that we use. The customers, all they need to do is smell the fragrance and wear it for a day to know the kind of quality that is being used, because a fragrance is an experience. We feel the experience should last 8 to 12 hours. And in those 8 to 12 hours, you will learn about the fragrance and how it performs on your skin, because every skin reacts differently to even the same fragrance. So if I wear a fragrance and you wear the same fragrance, after 10, 15 minutes, we may perceive it differently after it has bonded with our skin chemistry. Coming to your question, for this region, it was not so much about pricing, but it was more about the scent style. In the US, the trends are very different. They like sweeter fragrances and fresher fragrances, and what we classify in the category of gourmand fragrances. So fragrances which evoke a sense of something edible but not really edible. So our fragrance, which is banana, whipped cream, dates, and saffron, is an example because it is, a very talked about fragrance in the US market. Whereas in the Middle East, it was really about tailoring the fragrance notes and making it more appealing to the notes and the notes profiles that people like here. So using different kinds of oud, using different kinds of rose, so our fragrances have a very good balance between Bulgarian and French rose. Again, one is Damascena rose background, one is Centifolia. So they're very different in terms of how they are perceived. Even when you smell them, you will find them very, very different to each other. So I would say that the ingredients which are very popular in this region are the ones that based our Oriental collection on. So we launched 5 fragrances, part of the Oriental line, and they were having fragrances with oud, saffron, rose, leather, suede. When it was fresh, it was using jasmine and white florals. So I think it was more regionalizing the product by having new fragrances, which are more appealing to the audience here. And we saw that when we had a recent event. People were immediately getting drawn towards those ingredients and those scent profiles. But the challenge was really, how do you set yourself apart when you create something Oriental? So when you have an oud or you have a rose, every single company in the fine fragrance world, if they want to have an operation in this region, they need those ingredients. So the challenge really was not identifying them, but really how do you bring about an artistic signature? And that really took the longest. So almost 24 months. It took us to figure out what kind of fragrances fit in those olfactive categories, but yet will create an impression that is very unique.
Correct. You in fact have a baklava flavor perfume, which is like amazing. And so But what do you think about the competition in the region? Because this market, we have heard from other perfumers also, is too saturated when it comes to the whole perfume industry or the ecosystem. So how do you take competition on a day-to-day basis? Or it doesn't bother you? How do you...
To be honest, I think, it is a very competitive market, but so is the US. More than 1,000 brands were launched last year in the North American and European market. So to try to still stay in the top 20, top 25 brands in terms of the quality of fragrances you're putting out is a challenge. Having said that, I think, we've been very surprised because our take-up in the UAE market has been very high already in a very short span of time. And I think the brands that continue to create new types of scent experiences will be the ones that will stand out. So what I mean by that is, if you are creating the same style of perfumes that are successful and you're repeating that, then you're really competing in a saturated market. When we are having our artistic and creative sessions, we are really not very concerned or pay too much attention to what's working. It is more sitting with the perfumers and saying, what should rose look like as a fragrance if it was being worn by a person who's dressed well? What does the rose fragrance, what should it smell like? And I think it is about being less concerned about what's trending and what the market is doing. I think there are many brands, including us, that are really putting out some, I would say, very artistic and somewhat experimental. I mean, there are chances that the fragrance doesn't do well, but I think it's a choice you have to take. Do you create fragrances that 8 out of 10 people will say, yeah, it's nice, or do you create fragrances which 5 out of 10 people will absolutely love? And we are really about creating those brand loyalists. So even in the US, it has really been, tens of thousands of people that we say are now our cheerleaders and our brand loyalists who are really, enjoying what we create. The fact that we really, experience and mix notes and contrast notes, which has really become a foundation of the brand. So you talk about baklava as a fragrance. When we set out to do this, the first thing we did with the perfumers was tell them to forget everything they know about baklava, because that would turn out to be a very heavy, dense fragrance. And we said we want to create a baklava fragrance, but something that somebody can wear in Dubai or anywhere in the Middle East or anywhere in the world on a day-to-day basis, even if the weather is warm or if it's cooler. And that really required you to use the inspiration of baklava, the storyline of the baklava dessert, but then really making it in a perfume style, which is why we brought in a very strong orange blossom facet together with bergamot. And, it was ranked in the top 10 perfumes of 2023 in New York. So I think there is a market for creativity. And I think the brands that do that will definitely stand out to consumers who are looking for that differentiation. Because people, when they spend that sort of money on a perfume, they really want to have a feeling of difference, that when people are around them, they are definitely mesmerized by their aura. And that really requires you can't take a cookie cutter approach. So if one type of oud is selling very well, you cannot give that customer that same experience, because he's coming to certain brands like us, for that unique experience. So whether it's our baklava fragrance, or it is our, as I said, our banana fragrance, or it is even our Turkish coffee leather oud fragrance, which people were very surprised about. I created it with the perfumer, Mr. Jorge Lee, as a personal creation, but we got such fantastic feedback that we commercialized it. And I was amazed at how many people were loving it, recently at an event. So I think there is a lot of room for creativity. So from that perspective, I think the market is not saturated at all. And I think there's a lot of room for brands like us and for new brands that keep coming to the UAE, that as long as they're offering, and in the Middle East, as long as they're offering a creative scent profile, it may appear as a more risky route, but in the long run, it will definitely, I think, fare well for the brand and for the brand loyalists that you will create over time.
Correct. But from your experience, who do you think buys perfume more? Like, is it the women or is it the men?
Okay, so that if you asked me this 3 years ago, my answer would have been different, because our market was slightly skewed towards the male customer. Whereas global trends show more females consume perfume than men. And we were always a bit perplexed about, how do we make sense of this? Are we not marketing enough to women? Is there a flaw that we need to address? Are we not really appealing to them? But I would say that what we did realize was that, if it really depends on the kind of scent profiles you create. And over the last 3 years, we have created a lot more scent profiles which are more unisex and more feminine appealing as well. And I think that has really, come as a major surprise, because the growth that we have seen in that, I think, has surprised a lot of our retailers as well, who historically have had at that niche, fragrance buyer was slightly skewed towards male, but now I think in the last 3 years it is skewed more towards female. So I would say at this moment we are probably having a 60-40 split in favor of the female customer.
That's amazing. Good to know.
Yes, yes.
That we shop the most.
Yes, you definitely do. And it seems to be definitely, the research shows it's a global trend. But I think, in the US in particular, we are seeing fragrances as a category and fine fragrance to really boom. Even the retail outlets and the department stores are reporting, almost a 35% year growth last year. I think we are really seeing fragrances take off post, this event of COVID. I think a lot of people who are able to spend time at home and really, experience the fragrances more, as opposed to using fragrance just from a utilitarian perspective. So I think the artistic nature of the perfumes have started to be appreciated at the niche level, at the niche fragrance level. And I think it's also then encouraged many brands and perfumers to really work outside the box and say, now that people want more of this, how do you really create, an experience which is very unique? So, that's why all of our fragrances, we try very hard that it's got, first of all, the story has to be appealing to the customer, really how it all came about. And then even the way the fragrances are contrasted. So, as I said, you touched on the baklava fragrance, we touched on the banana fragrance. We've also made a fragrance which we launched end of last year, which is built on milk and marshmallows and a croissant accord. And again, it's a very cozy fragrance, which has been an instant hit with customers, because I think a lot of people are also wearing perfume to find comfort, and having something with a lactonic milk vibe, I think has really fared well. And it seems to be also a trend that we are seeing more announcements of in the last 3 months in that category. So I think there are brands which are leading creativity, a handful of them, and I think those brands will continue to set the trends of what's working and also what's not working.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Hayan, lastly, what are the top 3 trends that you see will dominate probably retail and obviously your industry? You can touch upon that also, but yeah, top 3 trends.
I would say the first one, which I see coming very hard into this region, because it has come very hard in the US, is sustainability. I don't see much talk about it here, but I think there will be certain brands, and I know there are certain brands already, which is part of their DNA. And I think when the normal consumer catches on its importance for them, I think those brands that have already got it as part of the DNA, they will be far more appealing, and they will definitely take a more disproportionate share from the market. So sustainability in terms of, and it's not just sustainability of the raw materials in a fragrance, that is, I would say, somewhat the perfumer's job. But as a fine fragrance company, you have to look at the entire value chain and say, is my packaging sustainable? If I'm using, there's a lot of talk about only using natural ingredients, but right now, if you look at sandalwood created through a synthetic compound with a green chemistry principle is more sustainable than using natural sandalwood. So if that's the pillar you want to stand on, then your choice of ingredients needs to reflect it as well. So it is walking the talk of sustainability as opposed to having just a claim for it. I think that the customers will start seeing through this as time goes on. So sustainability, I think, is going to be extremely, extremely important. And 2, I think it is going to be about, really about creating contrasted fragrance experiences. And what I mean by that is, I think what we are seeing in this region as well is that the fragrance consumer is extremely advanced. They have already have 100, 200, 300 fragrance bottles with them. They already know fragrance very well. And I think going forward, the trends that the perfumers really have to work much harder on is how do you really give something new, still using the same ingredients that people like to smell. So using oud, using saffron, using rose, how do you create scent profiles which are contrasted, which are unique? So I think that using the same ingredients but trying to bring them out in innovative ways will continue being very, very important, especially at a time now where Dubai and the Middle East is really opening up from a fine fragrance perspective. So many international companies coming in. I think the local consumer is going to have so much choice that for them, if it doesn't excite them in the first minute of smelling a fragrance, they would not look back at that brand or that fragrance. So I would say sustainability, the use of notes, and I would also just say that the entire production process when it comes to clean perfumery principles. So how clean is your fragrance? How many people confuse that with a sustainable business practice, but they're entirely different. And I think clean perfumery is definitely becoming a buzzword in the US. There are in fact brands that are launched entirely on that principle. You've got even brands like Guerlain now who've got collections which are what they call clean, water-based. And I think the customer going forward is not necessarily only going to have water-based perfumes that they're interested in, but even the conventional luxury heritage brands, I think, need to start letting people know, what about their fragrances is clean. Because it's many of the ingredients which used to be considered normal to use before, now by international regulation are not allowed, or they are being, discontinued. So you have to stop using certain ingredients at certain times of the year. So there are some deadlines to meet in the mid of 2024 and mid of 2025. So they will have to take them off the shelf. So whilst regulatory bodies are pushing companies to become clean, I think there are many companies that will take the leap forward and say, no, we want to do it proactively. We want to do it without being regulated as such. And I think, again, sustainability and clean as two trends, I think they will start catching up on this region, just like we're seeing in other markets.
Amazing. So I would want to add here. So you mentioned that people should start talking to the customer about this whole proposition of sustainability, clean beauty. But how much do you tell the back-end story to your customers on marketing platforms, social media platforms?
I think, when people buy into a brand, I think they really, before they even smell a fragrance or enjoy a fragrance, there is a small percentage of customers who can smell something in a store and they like it, but usually you find people buying into a brand and they'll buy into the brand story. And for us, biodegradability is extremely important on a fragrance, how biodegradable our fragrances are. So the fragrance that people got to experience last week, that was almost having an 80% biodegradability factor. Upcycled ingredients are becoming extremely trending. For us, it is very important that with every fragrance that we bring out, we let our customers know that all those principles are extremely important, and we bring it out in different forms of marketing. So it is not something that I would say that we push down a customer because it's not a selling tool. It's not a selling tool, but in our events, whenever we have them in the US and internationally, our customers are always excited and interested to know and learn from the perfumers why this particular fragrance is also following the principles that Navitus is known for. Because it is, each fragrance may have a slightly different level of biodegradability. Each one may have a slightly different level of the upcycle ingredients that are being used. So each story in itself is a story due to the ingredients that are being used. So if it is a rose, if it is a sandalwood, if it is a vanilla, each fragrance has different balances, and our principles of clean and sustainability, need to be, I would say, followed whenever the perfumers are creating, because now the perfumers also understand, what each brand is standing up for and what each brand is known for. And I think it is an investment because obviously the cost of production is much higher. It is an investment in the long run because I feel that whilst in certain markets the trend is catching up to brands, but in other markets, I would say that brands are really having to keep reminding people that this is the principles they go by, and I think long term, all other brands will have to follow this. It's the example of, other technologies that the UAE and the Middle East have adopted, which many people felt that it would not catch up, or it's something of the West and it will not apply to our people here. And we've seen that, the Middle East is one of the fastest adopters of all things sustainable, all things clean. And, in many industries, it is becoming a front runner to lead that development process globally.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And just all the best with all the
Thank you.
success.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you.